Hello, everyone. We would like to welcome you for the first time in so many months to the museum, so thank you so much for joining us. This is Nancy from the Highline Heritage Museum. I'm the Executive Director, and we are doing this project in a collaboration with multiple partnerships. But I would like to do this real quickly. Let's take a moment to recognize that we are in a native land. Please think in honor of those who have preceded us, including the people of the Duwamish, the Snoquamish, Nisqually, and Muckleshoot tribe. You're gonna start seeing this being the new norm. Every single program and cultural institution are promoting this through the whole, hopefully the whole country. And so I would like that you also think about this, and just once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello everyone, and welcome to 7 Stories. I am your host for the evening, Crystal Hairston, and I'd like to welcome you to this evening's event. Whether you're joining us in person here in the studio here at the lovely Highline Heritage Museum or virtually through live streaming, you're all welcome. 7 Stories is a community gathering event where we get the pleasure of hearing local storytellers tell real experiences based on a particular theme. Our goal is always to have 7 diverse stories under 7 minutes each. Remember that when you're telling your story. Tonight's theme is Uncharted Territory, which I'm sure many of us can relate to given the season, but I'm particularly intrigued to hear you all's stories from our guests today. You might feel like strangers now, but as often happens at these events, hopefully you'll end this time feeling like you've made some new acquaintances and maybe even be inspired to share your own story for our next monthly event. So next month's theme is Plan B, happening on November 19th, Friday, November 19th. And in December, If Only I'd Listened. I'm sure there'll be lots of stories from that one. And in January, How Did I Get Here? So, if you are relating to any of those things, you can prepare your story for the upcoming 7 Stories events. Also, we'd love to hear back from you. We'd love to hear about your experience. And so there are some papers and cards. Anytime during this time or afterward, we invite you to just jot down some notes or some thoughts so that we can continue to offer this and give a wonderful experience. Sound great? Mm-hmm. Awesome, welcome. I'm going to invite Nancy back here, and she will introduce our first storyteller for the evening.
Thank you, Crystal. The first person is Cindy Optigrove. If you don't know who she is, you really need to know. You need to Google her because she's amazing. She is one of the main reasons as to why the museum is open. She has been fighting so hard to making it happen. And every single time, I've been knowing her for 16, 18 years now. Every single time that I talk to her, it's always something new. Unbelievable stories. I mean, every single time she's like, whoa. I mean, it's probably that's the most common word that I have with her, like, whoa. Because she's just an amazing person. So I'm really happy that to introduce her. She is just an incredible woman, and I hope that this is not the only time that you're going to be able to listen to her story. She's going to be joining us also for Women's History Month, so just stay tuned for that. So here she is. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you to the Highline Heritage Museum. I've never been a program for the museum before, though I've done a lot of them here. Uncharted Territory. What an unusual title. I have to go back 53 years to tell a real quick story about a venture into uncharted territory. My husband and I moved out here from Minnesota when he was a new pilot for Northwest Airlines. He was a young second officer flying flight engineer on the 707, and we had never been to this part of the country. We were newlyweds, and he had a friend with a light airplane, and he wanted to learn and check himself out on this light airplane, so if our families came out, he could fly them around and show them what a gorgeous place this was. So he went out with a friend one day, and they started to go up to Payne Field, where his friend who was a flight instructor, was going to check out an aircraft of his own to buy. And en route, they encountered technical difficulties with the aircraft and crashed into the roof of a house in North Seattle. They were both terribly injured. Our friend subsequently passed away from his injuries. And John was several months recovering enough to even go back and take extra training or anything else. And as time went by, I was obviously traumatized by this. And as time went by, I said to him one day, he said, well, I may have to get another aircraft and get checked out. I said, I don't want you flying little airplanes. Oh my gosh. I had been a stewardess and had thousands of hours on big airplanes, but I didn't want him on those. And he looked at me and he said, you know, I fly airplanes for a living. I don't want you to be afraid. So I want you to go with our friend Larry and take at least 3 hours of flight instruction so you understand really how this flying works. So I reluctantly agreed, and at the end of 3 hours, I was completely hooked. And I said, oh my gosh, I love this. And I went on to solo and started building some flight time. And I would fly a lot when he was out of town, because I didn't want him saying, I told you so. So it came upon time for me to start my cross-country fly. And you had to fly at least an hour and make 3 stops, each about that far apart. And I was 7 months pregnant. And I got in the airplane and I flew up to Arlington, and the only thing I could think about besides landing the plane was, I have to find a ladies' room. As most women know who have had children, when you're 7 or 8 months pregnant, they're sitting where you've got to go to the bathroom. So I landed and I taxied to the flight service station, and I had called for landing instructions, and there were not many women flying out here 53 years ago. There were maybe 10 members of the 99s. And so we were kind of strange. And so as soon as I landed, all these guys came out to see, who's this woman? And I climbed out on the wing of that plane, and I was very pregnant, and they just went, oh my gosh, who is this? And they ran up and wanted to help me off, and I said, what? They said, what can we do for you? And I said, where's the ladies' room? I don't know if I remember. So after I came back from the ladies' room, I rechecked the aircraft and started to climb onto the wing and get back into the plane, which is a little cumbersome when you're 7 months pregnant. And they said, we want to talk to you. There were about 4 guys. And I said, what do you want to talk about? Well, we've been talking, we don't think you should fly back to Renton. And I said, why not? And they said, one of us will drive you back to Renton, and one of the others here will take your plane back. And I said, why? And they said, well, we just don't think it's appropriate for a woman in your condition to be flying an airplane. And I said, pardon me? And they said, well, it's kind of unseemly. I said, you mean you've never seen a pregnant woman fly an airplane? And they said, well, yeah, and you shouldn't do that. Women shouldn't do things like that. Of course, this was a time when I couldn't have credit either, if those of you who might be my age know. And I said, sorry guys, I'm flying this plane back to Renton. Turned out I did not get my pilot's license that summer, because the next time I had an opportunity to fly, I was large enough that I had to slide the seat back in the aircraft and my feet wouldn't reach the ground. So that brought it to a stop, and I'm sure they would have been happy. But they thought a pregnant woman should not fly an airplane. And for me, that was uncharted territory. But I'd like to point out that I think that the people who were really in uncharted territory was that bunch of guys. And that's my story.
Thank you, Cindy. That was fabulous, and I will be looking to sit around you pretty soon so I can hear another story. Our second storyteller this evening is Lloyd Sasson. Did I say that right? Okay. Lloyd describes himself as A writer, creative thinker, generally acceptable public speaker, terrible automotive mechanic, wishful humorist, and licensed motorist. That's very impressive. As a retired entrepreneur developing businesses to finance his college and augment his teacher's income, Lloyd has turned his attention to writing. His works run the gamut of odd yet interesting essays, lighthearted anecdotes, and autobiographical commentaries on the meaning of life and the nature of humans. Lloyd and his wife of 30 years currently live in Burion's Shorewood neighborhood. Please help me welcome Lloyd.
So this is an uncharted territory for me. And because of that, I wrote down what I'm going to say because it's best for me. My youngest son once asked if life was crazy. Well, life has its ups and downs. I wasn't ready for college right after high school, though I had set that as a goal. And unaware of opportunity to choose from, I followed my father's example. He had joined the Navy after high school, so I did. The military offered college at the end of the 4 years. I knew little of nothing but a bit about politics or the United States aspiration for domineering in the name of democracy. Moreover, the private school I attended didn't teach geography. Vietnam meant nothing. I believed my country could do no wrong. Even though racism was all around me, my parents said nothing about it. So I wasn't on guard when I faced unexplained covert discrimination in high school and in the Navy. I confronted these problems, setting goals to guide me. The first, live to 122 years as a healthy, wealthy, and wise man. That entailed proper diet, exercise, bicycling, walking, swimming, and other activities, and being astutely financially literate. Education is always the first priority. I am always studying. Second, bring peace to the world around me and encourage it to spread. That means it is something I can't accomplish alone. A fellow author and a good friend, James D. Macon, wrote in his 4th book of the Profile Journey series, he wrote, "Now that we are older, we've learned that the innocence of youth did not foresee the responsibilities that come with age. In that, I'm encumbered to tell you about Brother Rabbit, Up and Down Saga, a Bear Rabbit story. One day, Bear Rabbit and Bear Fox and Bear Coon and Bear Bear and a whole lot of them were clearing the grounds to plant sweet potato patch. The sun began to get sort of hot, and Bear Rabbit, he got tired, but he didn't let on because he feared the others would call him lazy. And he kept on digging the ground, getting closer and closer to the gate, till by and by, he sees no one is watching him, and so he slips off to hunt for a cool place to rest. After a while, he comes across a well with a bucket hanging in it. That looks cool, he says, Bear Rabbit, and cool I expect it is. I'll just about get in there and take a nap. And with that, he jumped. And no sooner that he got comfortable than the bucket began to creep down. Bear Rabbit, he was mighty scared. He knew where he had been, but he didn't know where he was going. Suddenly he felt the bucket hit the water, and there it sat. But Bear Rabbit, he kept mighty still because he didn't know what minute was going to be the next. He just laid there and shook and shivered. Bear Fox always had an eye on Bear Rabbit, and when he slipped from the planting ground, Bear Fox snuck off after him. He knew Bear Rabbit was after some project or another, and he took off and crept off and walked to watch him. Bear Fox watched Bear Rabbit come to the top of the well and stop. And then, lo and behold, he saw him jump down out of sight. Bear Fox was the most astonished fox that you ever laid eyes on. He sat down in the bushes and thought this over, but couldn't make any heads or tail of this kind of business. Then he said to himself, well, if this don't beat everything, he said. Right down right down there in that well, Bear Rabbit keeps all his money. And if that's not it, then he gone down there and he discovered gold. And if that's not it, then I'm going to see what's in there, he said. Bear Fox crept up a little nearer and listened, but he didn't hear any fuss. And he kept on getting near, and yet he didn't hear anything. By and by, he got close enough to peek down, but he couldn't see anything, and he still couldn't hear anything. By this time, Bear Rabbit was mighty near scared out of his skin, and he was afraid to move because the bucket might keel over and spill him into the water. While he was saying his prayers over and over, old Bear Fox hollered out, "Hey, you, Bear Rabbit, who are you visiting down there?" He said. "Who, me? Oh, I'm just a fishing, Bear Fox," said Bear Rabbit. I just said to myself that I'd sort of surprise you all with a mess of fish, and here I am, and there they are, and I'm a fishing for supper, Bear Fox, Bear Rabbit said. "Are there very many of them down there, Bear Rabbit?" Bear Fox said. "Lots of them, Bear Fox, scores and scores of them. The water is naturally alive with them. Come on down and help me haul them in, Bear Fox," said Bear Rabbit. "How am I going to get down, Bear Rabbit?" "Jump into the other bucket, Bear Fox. It'll fetch you down all safe and sound." Bear Rabbit talked so happy and sweet. The Bear Fox jumped in the bucket. He did, and he went down, and his weight pulled Bear Rabbit up. When they passed one another halfway down, Bear Rabbit sang out, "Goodbye, Bear Fox, take care of your clothes. I'm sure you'll get to the bottom all safe and sound, for some goes up and some goes down, and that's the way the world turns round." When Bear Rabbit got out, he galloped off and told some people who owned the well that Bear Fox was down there muddying up the drinking water, and then he galloped back to the well and hollered down to Bear Fox, "Here come a man with a great big gun. When he hauls you up, jump and run." Soon enough, Bear Fox was out of the well, and in just about a half hour, both of them were back in the planting ground, working just as if they had never heard of a well. But every now and then, Bear Rabbit would burst out laughing, and Bear Fox would scowl and say nothing. And I thought the story would be a surprise to you.
That was awesome. My favorite part was when I got fooled, because I was like, "What's down there?" And then of course he's coming back up. That was great. Thank you so much, Gaylord. Our third storyteller this evening is Michael Shilley. Michael was born in Winchester, England in 1935, immigrated to Canada in 1967, and then Seattle in 1968. Sports, not academics, was Michael's thing growing up. From the age of 9, he was always in competitive league as goalkeeper in soccer, wicketkeeper in cricket, boxing, weightlifting, you name it. From age 18 until he immigrated, Michael ran his own weightlifting gym, and since living in the U.S., has remained active in junior and senior soccer as a player, a coach, a referee, and an administrator. And after a 10-year lull while running his business and getting out of shape, like a lot of us have, he reconnected with weight training, which he credits to his present fitness and health. So please join me in welcoming a very fit and interesting Michael Shilley.
I think she's probably told me an old story right now. a first generation immigrant. Are there anybody else first generation immigrants in the room? I've got one, okay. Well, my story is about immigration, and I was born in Winchester, north. It's 14 miles north of Southampton, which is a big shipping port, where in my days as a kid, the big liners used to come in and out of Southampton to New York every day. And pretty interesting place to live. Before we get started, I want to sort of say something. When I come here in '67, my kids were 2 and 4. And now they're in their mid and late 50s. And I have grandkids and great-grandkids. And they're multi-ethnic and multi-colored. And so I've been on a 30-year vendetta, no, I don't know what you would call it, but a search, I guess, for meaning of being white is. And I found out what white privilege is. And when I immigrated, I took advantage of white privilege, although I didn't know what it was. And so the story starts in Eastleigh. It's a town right in the middle of Winchester and Southampton. It's a working class town, several different factories. And I've worked in the plumbing and heating industry since I was 15 years old. I left school with an apprenticeship in Winchester, 6 years apprenticeship. And done 2 years compulsory army service. And when I come out, I joined the union, and they shipped you from different jobs. As you know, in construction, you're always out of work. And my wife she really used to get upset when I was let go, and always worried I'd never get another job. So I never ever told her when I got laid off. I always told her when I got the next job. So, yeah. So I was working in this cable factory, 3,000 employee factory. I was pipe fitter on maintenance. And after a couple of years, I was made shop steward. I was running this weightlifting club, like you were told. And one guy was doing his workout, final workout before a contest on a Sunday afternoon. And when we were working, let me just tell you this, a good job in England in the 50s and 60s was one with plenty of overtime. And we used to work nearly every weekend and a couple of evenings. And I say, 2-year and a 4-year-old kid, I say, you'd never see him grow up. It was one of the reasons I emigrated. But yeah, I was working in this factory. And so I went out on Sundays. You could go out at 12 or 1, and you only had a clock in. So I skimmed the clock and went at 12, helped him with his weightlifting, and come back at 2, and security caught me. Didn't say anything, but I was called to the engineer's office the next morning, Monday morning, and he had my wages and slip there. And he said, I'm going to make you an example. He said, you've been a shop steward, you're supposed to set the example. So now you are going to be the example. The usual punishment was a week's wages, but for me it was dismissal. So I never told my wife. Next morning I woke up at the same time. She didn't used to get up in the morning for breakfast or anything, make my breakfast. Instead of going to work, I got on the train, went to London, walked across the Canada House, and I said to him, I'd like to go to Canada ASAP. So I took all the tests and the examinations and interviews, and he said, well, okay, well, your trade then, you better go to Edmonton. Edmonton, I said, well, isn't that like 6 months of winter every year in Edmonton? So, that's where all the work is for you guys. I said, no. I said, I want to go to Vancouver. I said, I can't stand that weather. So, the time I left, they give me a visa for 6 months from the day I left. I could go anywhere in between then and 6 months. So, and they were going to let me go to Vancouver. I actually wrote to the union in Vancouver. They also said, don't come, we don't have any work. And I wanted to go as any place I could go. So 15th of February, 1967, I got on an airplane to Amsterdam. From Amsterdam I flew on Canadian Pacific we stopped at Calgary first, and I remember getting out of the airplane. stopped away from the terminal, and I could get onto the level there and look west to the Rocky Mountains. I mean, say, beautiful Rocky Mountains, covered with snow, blue sky, beautiful, sun was out. I thought I'd arrived in heaven. But hour and a half later, I was in front of the Canadian immigration officer, and he's a very nice man. He gave me a free taxi ride downtown, and a rooming house, he said, there's a room there for you. So they drove me downtown, right into Granville Street, which is their entertainment district. There's a restaurant on the street, and the stairs upstairs, and so I went up, fair enough, gave me a room, it was 2 o'clock in the morning in England at that time. It was 6 there, but 2 in England. I was ready for sleep. I went to sleep, and about midnight, I could hear running feet outside the window, and I was on the second floor. And I get up and looked at it, and sure enough, there's people running around on this roof. I could see from the street lights, and going in through windows. Well, I'll get back to sleep, and 6 o'clock in the morning, get changed, go down, go into this restaurant downstairs and go for breakfast. And there's a couple of seats left at the counter, so I sit at the counter and answer a question from the waitress. So all heads turn around and say, "Hey, where do you come from?" You know, it's, I had a pretty strong English accent in those days. And so I started, they started helping me with the menu. I'd never heard of hash brown before, or ever being asked, you know, how do you want your eggs? I've never been asked that. And this coffee, it kept on coming, one cup after the other. And it was so beautiful. And so when the bill came, I looked at it. It was just pretty reasonable. No, just 1 cup of coffee. I said, "Oh, that's right." They said, "We only pay for the first cup of coffee." Fine. And they said, "Well, where are you staying?" I said, "Upstairs." I said, "Don't you know that's a room for the ladies of the night?" I said, "No, I said, immigration should have known better." So they told me how to find the YMCA, and I promised them I'd go and check in there, which I did. I took off north through the cavern of tall buildings in Vancouver, and I could see Grouse Mountain with snow on it at the end of the street. 2 blocks over was Burrard Street. I walked down Burrard Street to the YMCA, and they gave me a room for not that night, but the next night. So I had to go back and spend one more night there. But I'll skip forward a little bit. I did get a lovely room in the YMCA, YMCA, sorry. And it actually had a view of the mountain. It was just beautiful. What I should tell you though is that when I came out of the Y that day, I headed south on the street, and I say these massive great cars. I'd never seen such big cars. I mean, say in England there were little black cars, and here they had these massive great cars, all different colours. And as the day warmed up, the canopies come back, and they see all beautiful seats. You say, "What is this?" It's just, I never expected it. And further on down, I met English Bay, which was a seawater bay with sandy beach. And I just spent all kinds of time just wandering around. But jet lag got hold of me, and so I headed back to the restaurant, the same place I had, and they had salmon on the menu, which you couldn't even buy in England in those days. You couldn't, a working man could never afford it, and if you could find it. And a big piece of fresh salmon, fresh vegetables and a baked potato, and some more of that beautiful coffee, of course. When I got back to the Y, as you heard, I used to run a weightlifting club in England, and I got very friendly with a national organizer in London, Oscar Heidenstam, and he gave me a name of a person to look up when I got to Vancouver, a name of Gordon. And so I looked in the phone book, got his phone, called him, and he said, "Hey," he said, "I work out in the gym," he said, "Saturday morning." He said, "Meet me in the lobby." So, which I did, and he did. And he said, "Come on," he said. And he took me out in his car, a powder blue Cadillac, massive great thing, white upholstery. We drove back by his butcher shop. He bought this big piece of meat. he took me over to through Stanley Park. I don't know if you've been up there to Stanley Park, the jewel of Vancouver. Across the Burrard Bridge, a steel bridge, and down in the down in the West Vancouver. Guinness of dark beer fame years ago built this mountain. People thought they were crazy. Well, Gordon lived in the highest house on that mountain. When I met his wife and daughters, and they welcomed me very, very well, you know, went out on their deck, I could see down into the United States. So I thought, why? You know, this guy, he was actually the representative, insurance rep for the Bank of Canada. So he had some really big contacts. I was invited to the house several times after that, and I could say that he was a good mentor for me. And of course, that's another story that I could tell later, maybe. That, let's see if I've missed anything out. Oh yeah, well, probably time's already up, huh? Time up? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
I can tell that Michael is going to be another one of those people that I need to sit down with at the table and hear, because I want to hear some more of that. Let's do a check-in. I hope you all are enjoying the story so far. Sometimes I was sharing, when I see people on the street, where I'm passing by or someone's coming out of a restaurant or someplace, I'm always wondering, what is their story? So I think that's the gift of this time, is we get to literally just have a chance to lean in a bit further and find out more stories. So let's continue with our next storyteller. Our fourth storyteller of the night is Deborah Apple. Deborah Apple lives in Burien and likes walking, cookbooks, and cooking for friends and family, which I suggested maybe we should just have this at her house next time. So please welcome with me, Deborah.
The other morning, I got a text from my best friend, and she said, "I'm having a Deborah kibbutz moment with a cup of tea." And I don't know if that means anything to you, but I knew exactly what she was referring to, which was an experience I had 45 years ago when I was a volunteer on a kibbutz in Israel. So for those of you who might not know what that is, it's a communal settlement, it's a commune, where people live together, they work. The economy was traditionally based on agriculture. Everybody works and everybody is provided for with whatever they need for a happy, safe, and healthy life. So it was, anyway, I want to tell the story of how going to this uncharted territory led to a defining moment in my life. So the kibbutzim were a very popular destination for kids who are traveling around the world because, first of all, the Holy Land resonates with a lot of people from all different religions and places. But also, if you're on a kibbutz, you get free room and board. So it's a good gig. They pay, you don't have to pay anything, and you get to travel around the country when you have the time. So I signed up for a stint when I finished college, and I went over a week or two before it was to begin so I could travel around the country. And my first stop was Jerusalem. So I got there, I went into the old city, went into the Arab market, which is called the Shuk, and it blew me away. It was an assault on the senses, and I mean that in a good way, because the intoxicating, before you even got in there, smells of spices, roasted nuts, coffee, stuff baking, just incredible. And then the sounds of people talking in all different languages, frequently at the top of their lungs, and people crying out, they're selling all their stuff, and music that I wasn't familiar with that I thought was really cool. And then visually, there was just so much stuff, very colorful pottery. Each vendor had his own little stall. There were embroidered dresses hanging that would flap in the breeze, jewelry, rugs, of course they have all these rugs, and then there was the food, the fruit, the vegetables, piles of spices, everything you can imagine. So what did I buy? I bought a transistor radio that got one station, but that was my purchase, and food. And then I met a girl who was a Swiss girl going back to Switzerland who wanted to sell her sleeping bag. I'd never had a sleeping bag and I wanted one, so for $15 I got this thing, which was actually, it was like a blanket, but you could fold it in half and it zipped at the bottom and along the side, and it's a bag. And while I was traveling for that next week or so before I got to the kibbutz, it was handy. I slept in it on the beach on the Dead Sea and Eilat in the Sinai Peninsula. It was cozy, it was nice. So I get to the kibbutz, and if someone had said to me, so can you describe this place in one word? It would have been simplicity. This was a simple way of life, no frills. You might even say, for people from the United States, Spartan. You know, it really was real basic. But people who didn't have a whole lot were happy. They were happy with what they were doing. And I just want to say a little about immigration to Israel. Israel, like the United States, is a country of immigrants. And people go there for different reasons. So someone, say, from the United States, I mean, you know, it's not a bad place, it's fine. Go there mostly either for idealism. They want to be pioneers, especially on these kibbutzim back in the day when you're tilling the soil and, you know, building stuff. And, or if they're very religious and they want to live there, or, I don't know, you know, want an adventure. And then there are the people who don't come from countries where they're safe and fed and everything. And they just, like people who come here as refugees, need a place to live. And so as a homeland where they can get citizenship, they go there. Not to mention, after World War II, the people who didn't get out in time but survived all the massacres went to Israel, where they could find a new life. And, you know, they'd lost everything, including their families and their country, but they were given citizenship and a new start in life. So that's kind of a mix. And on the kibbutz, there was a mix of everything. But one thing that really was common to all of them was this was not a materialistic kind of place. They were not there to keep up with the Joneses. They were just doing their thing and wanted to be together as a community. So as I said, it was pretty rustic accommodations. And where the volunteers lived, we had little buildings. There was a room here, and on the side, like a bathroom and shower thing. And 3 to a room. So we each had a bed, a blanket, a towel, a pillow. Again, very basic living. It was, you know, it was like, it reminded me of a cabin at summer camp from the 50s or something here. And we each had an orange crate that stood on its side as a bedside table. And then there was a regular table with an electric kettle to boil the water for the endless cups of tea and coffee that we drank or would serve to people who came by. They also gave us clothes, so we didn't have to scuzz up our regular clothes working. We had working clothes. So my first job for the first few months was in the orange groves, which I loved. I should say citrus, because there were clementines and grapefruit and all sorts of stuff. I love fruit. I'm a real fruitaholic. So to eat it just fresh from the tree was a real treat for me. But because it was winter, it was cold, and it would rain sometimes. So one day I was out there freezing, soaking wet and muddy, and I couldn't wait to get out of there and get back to my room. So I got back to the room. I hung my dirty clothes on the hook outside the door, which was for that purpose, and I went in and took a shower in the little lukewarm trickle, which is what the shower was, but, you know, got clean, put on fresh clothes, went in and put the kettle on. And that was something, well, I guess in England, they're always, at least on TV, they're always putting the kettle on when someone comes in. Put the kettle on, and I made myself a cup of bots. Now, bots means mud. And what this is you put coffee, very finely ground coffee, it's like Turkish coffee, in the cup, you put in boiling water, you stir it around, wait for it to settle a little, and then you drink it. So we each also had a plastic cup, a plastic plate, a knife, a fork, and a spoon. All the basic needs. So I took my cup of books, I put it on the bedside orange crate. I put my pillow up against the back wall so I could sit up in bed. I pulled up my blanket from the Swiss Girl and just cuddled under it. I put on my radio station and I drank my first sip of coffee and I thought, oh man, it just doesn't get any better than this. And that was the defining moment when I understood that happiness can be found in very, very simple pleasures, and that blissful contentment can be found in a cup of books in a plastic cup. So when I find myself getting worked up over stuff that isn't important or maybe doesn't matter at all, I need to take myself back to that place and say, hey, you got everything. There's pleasure and happiness to be found in a steaming hot cup of coffee, or in the case of my friend who texted me, of tea.
Beautiful, Deborah. Thank you so much. Our fifth storyteller has enjoyed careers in both Christian ministry and as an elementary public school teacher. Now, as a former teacher myself, I'm sure he could fill a book with classroom stories alone. But here to share some wild adventures of his own, please help me welcome Don West.
And I apologize, I don't have a school story for you, but the theme is something we run into in schools and in life all the time. So a number of years ago, my wife Carolyn and our good friend Steve and I took a tuk-tuk ride across Bangkok into Uncharted Territory. What's a tuk-tuk? Tuk-tuk is basically a three-wheeled motorcycle. The driver sits on the front wheel, and there's a seat across the back wheels for passengers, in our case, 3 passengers. There's a roof over the top. Tuk-tuks are, and the name comes from the tuk-tuk-tuk sound that the two-stroke engine makes. They are all over Bangkok. They are loud and noisy. I mean, they're loud and smelly and fast. And they get people through Bangkok's really difficult traffic really quickly, so they're pretty popular. They also have a difficult reputation. I was in a van one time, and that's a much higher category of driver, or at least that's the way they feel. And we're driving, and tuk-tuks are going back and forth in front of us. And I asked the van driver, he says, I said, well, what do you think about tuk-tuks? And he looks at me, he scowls, he says, tuk-tuk no good. Turn left, turn right, turn over. So, a couple days later, Carolyn and Steve and I are going on our first tuk-tuk ride. And so we get in, it's a sweltering Bangkok summer night. We're pressed together, sort of sweaty, getting ready to go. And to begin with, it throws you off a little bit to be going in this tiny thing so fast on the wrong side of the street if you've lived all your life here where you're supposed to be on the right side. So we're going down the wrong side of the street while all these huge cars and trucks are honking horns and coming back at us this way. So that's just sort of context. But this guy managed to kick it up a bit because he seemed to think that we were late, apparently, getting to our destination. He wanted to make sure he got us there on time. So he comes up behind a bus that was going too slow for him. So as we're sitting here, he's making these feints out like this, not working that way. So he decides to floor it and pass on the left. So he is going full out along, we're going along the bus in the narrowing slot between the bus and the left curb that it was trying to park at to let passengers on. So we scream all the way along and get out of the front of the bus just in time, and I'm pretty sure while we were in the slot, I was sucking air, and as we left, I said something like, "Cool." And I looked over at Carolyn, and she was not enjoying the trip. So, and we're just started at that point. So we continue on, and after a while, the driver reaches into a little pocket, pulls out a small notebook, hands it back to Carolyn, and says, "Lady, you read." Carolyn can't read in any moving vehicle, let alone one in which she keeps seeing her fate go, her life go past her eyes. And so she politely just leaves it in her lap. About the third time he says, "Lady, you read," I turn to her and say, "Lady, maybe you should read." So she pulls it out, and we're looking through it, and it is a multiple page brochure for a tailor shop. So now that we understand the agenda, we very politely give him back the notebook and say, "Thank you very much, but we really don't want to stop and buy a couple suits." He glares back at us, hits the gas again, and maybe 30 seconds later, pulls to a stop under an overpass with 3 or 4 other tuk-tuks and drivers there, gets out, goes over to this other guy, comes back, says, you get out, go with him. And so as we're walking toward the other tuk-tuk, we're realizing, had no idea that it was possible to get kicked out of a tuk-tuk. So we get in the new one, and now we're on another tuk-tuk ride, hopefully going to the same place. We don't know. And it's beginning to stretch out. It's beginning to seem long from what we know about where we wanted to go. And it was a sort of a strange ride to begin with. And we didn't really hear the communication of where we were supposed to be going. And so it's starting to get a little bit nervous. Carolyn's in the middle, Steve's sitting on the other side, and he sort of picks up on the tension. So he decides he's going to sort of help everyone feel better. So Steve says, well, gee, at least, sure good to know that the way he's driving around all these well-lit places that we're not going to get mugged. And so no sooner had I thought, well, maybe I should add something to the cheery observation, or maybe suggest another topic that would do the job better, when all of a sudden the guy turns left into the darkest, quietest neighborhood in all the trips since then in Bangkok that we've ever seen. There weren't vehicles moving anywhere. There were only a couple people sort of hanging around. And I could tell all 3 of us, on our own, individually, sat there, and we all came to the conclusion that Steve wasn't helping. So, however, it was only 4 or 5 dark, quiet minutes later of winding through these neighborhoods, dark, quiet, nervous minutes, that all of a sudden we burst out of the guy's shortcut to the light of the exact place that we had started out for originally. So we get out, we pay him, he goes on his way, and we go on about the night. Oh, and one of the things that made us realize we really had gotten kicked out of a tuk-tuk is the first driver even took off without taking any money from us. So really, what had happened on that ride was that Carolyn and Steve and I had been on a tuk-tuk ride into Uncharted Territory, where we had no power, we had no control, we didn't even have that much knowledge about where we were. And in spite of the fact that it's hard for us to understand this as middle-class Americans, in a day-to-day sense, middle-class people in America, especially white middle-class people in America, enjoy power and control over our daily lives that most people in the world never even have any idea is possible. And it's just as a normal, standard person. And we really like to maintain that position. Most of us work really hard at avoiding tuk-tuk rides. We don't like to be nervous. We don't like to not understand what's going on. We don't like to be confused and not sure of what to do. But to the degree that we refuse to give up a share of power and control, we miss so much. We miss the relationships and friendships and partnerships with people who are different from us, either racially or ethnically or culturally, economically, who may speak a different level of English than us, who live somewhere differently or don't even have a place to live. We miss those relationships. And in all those differences, if we're going to get across those differences and get close enough to people who are very different to know and understand and connect with them and know and understand ourselves better in the process, we can't be in control. Most people in the world, and an unfortunate number of people right here in Burien, live most of every day on the back seat of some kind of tuk-tuk. There is some way in which they are denied the ability to control the world around them. And if we refuse to get to ride with them, then it is incredibly hard, maybe impossible, for us to, come on, what's our theme? For us to enter the uncharted territory of friendship and respect and reconciliation and justice and peace, if we won't do that. And just as an added benefit, if you get in the habit of taking a tuk-tuk ride every once in a while, at least every time you do it, you can come away with a great story.
Wow, that was great, Don. You told on so many of us. As a matter of fact, I am the sixth storyteller, and it is about control by all means. I'm starting this round off of storytelling myself. I relocated, I'm Crystal Hairston again, if you don't remember my name. I relocated to the greater Seattle area about 10 years ago, but I'm originally from Portland, Oregon. And I work as a director of worship arts at Lake Burien Presbyterian Church, and I love serving this area. And so here's my own little story about Uncharted Territory. Uncharted. I'm a city kid. I grew up loving the thrill of adventure and activity. At home, we raced the streets, rode our bikes, climbed on roofs, made homemade mopeds and go-karts from extra lawnmower parts. And I always wanted to go to the biggest, fastest roller coasters at the theme park. But despite my parents' best efforts, the one thing that I couldn't seem to conquer was the water. I had no interest in anything that involved a pool of water. Growing up on the coast, water, like the ocean, was overwhelming to me. I felt totally out of control, disoriented, and fearful. Unless I could stand in it and keep my hair dry, you could count me out. So you can imagine my panic when halfway through my freshman year of college, I had to take a PE class with a mandatory swim course. The school actually did not graduate anyone who couldn't tread water for more than 30 minutes. So naturally, I changed schools. I mean, not for that reason, but I mean, it was an extra motivator. Fast forward, as I aged and became parent to children who loved water, I realized how much my fears limited me. So I made sure they swam like fish in case I needed saving one day. And I continue to enjoy my land adventures. My husband is my land mate. He never likes getting his hair wet either, so I never have to worry about missing anything until his latest birthday, when he decided to ask our water-loving teen and adult children, I look young, thank you, what we should do for his birthday, and they suggested paddleboarding, to which he agreed with glee. Now, the last time our family went paddleboarding, I cheered them on from the deck of a very small neighborhood lake that you could swim across in 3 minutes. With this mini-sized lake in mind, I thought I'll agree to participate in this family birthday activity. Yeah, I can do that. There'll be life jackets and shallow water, and then we pulled up to Lake Washington with boats in the water. I changed my mind. What was I thinking? As I gathered my wits and devised a plan to gracefully bow out after I had, got acclimated to the water and I was gonna float near the shore, our children excitedly decided that they're gonna paddle across the lake like they always do. And before I knew it, they were 50 yards out in front of me, dodging boats and calling for me to hurry up and catch up. And if there is anything that can help me get over my fears, it's protection and competition. You see, I do not like losing, not even to my own kids. So I made it into a race in my head and I was off. Although I would never stand because, that increases your risk of falling in. I just sat. The next thing I knew, I was in the middle of Lake Washington, the shores in every direction seeming like an eternity away. My family scattered like crumbs on a high chair table. My arms are exhausted. The boats are heading in my direction, pushing up extra waves for me to navigate. How did I let them convince me of this? But I was actually doing it. And as I paddled, one dig at a time, passers-by rooted me on. I felt so encouraged. It wasn't until we made it to the other side that one of our daughters shared the fun fact that Lake Washington gets to 214 feet deep at its deepest point. Not exactly the trivia that I wanted to hear when we still had a return trip to the other side. So I wasn't feeling too well. And to make matters worse, I was lightheaded because I forgot to eat breakfast. The smell of spoiled fish was on the shore. The constant up and down motion just wasn't a good combination. But this time we set off and tethered ourselves in pairs, partnering up. My husband was like, "I'm staying with you, babe." And I can anticipate the journey back a little bit better. We yelled messages like, "Take your time, rest if you need to." We shared energy drinks and found things to laugh at. But over time, the shore became closer and the water actually felt smaller and I felt bigger. I always think to myself that when my children eventually ask me how I had the courage to accomplish all of my land adventures I set out on, I would say, just show up, even if you're scared, and take a few steps. Don't worry about being the fastest or the best. Just take the first step. Now I can add, take the first paddle to that list. Thanks. Well, as if there's no pressure, Eric Matheson is the final storyteller of the night. Eric grew up on 5 acres in Burien that his dad donated to the city as a park. That's so cool. He attended local schools including Sunnydale, Sunny Terrace Elementary, Sylvester Junior High, Highline High, Highline College, and he graduated from Washington State University with degrees in communications and political science. He was editor of the Highline Times for 13 years before retiring in 2013, was named Burien City Citizen of the Year in 2014, and currently serves as Burien Arts Association Secretary. Wow, we're in good company. Welcome, Eric.
Well, I grew up in the sheltered suburb of Burien in the 1950s. Went away to college in Eastern Washington, came back, got married, got a job, had 2 kids, bought a large suburban house near Burien. And then after 13 years of marriage, my wife suddenly announced, "Nobody is better than you." Well, actually what she said is, having nobody is better than having. Well, so fortunately there was a newfangled dating aid in the 1980s that sort of helped me navigate the dating wilderness, answering personal ads in alternate newspapers. And of course now, with the advent of dating sites, that's become pretty old-fangled now. SWF, single white female. 32, looking for a single man for a possible relationship, was warm, intelligent, not a Republican. I am a sometimes artist and computer programmer, attractive in certain lights. I enjoy creative projects and miscellaneous adventures. Also, that was the ad, that was in the middle of the Women Seeking Men section in the Seattle Weekly. 32. Huh. Wow, that's 7 years younger than me. That's even 3 years younger than my baby sister. But, I decided very defiantly, why should only ancient, filthy rich men with hands as cold as ice get trophy girlfriends? Warm, intelligent? Well, I could fake that. Not a Republican. I have not now nor have I ever been a Republican. Sometimes artist, too flighty. Computer programmer, too boring. Attractive in certain lights, I'd like to know which lights those are. Creative projects and miscellaneous adventures, boy, I wonder what they are. Well, not a perfect match, but very intriguing, worth exploring. And so I set about writing my letter to attractive in certain lights. There was no, scrolling right or anything. And I sent it off by snail mail. Also, studying the personal ads, I had divided the women roughly into 2 categories. Hope I don't get lynched here. But anyway, the first group, blonde, WHP, weight, height, proportional. And that's described as gorgeous, high energy. Love snow skiing on Snoqualmie Pass in the early morning and water skiing on Lake Washington in the afternoon. Boy, I didn't have the physical or emotional energy for that. So the second group, enjoy long talks and beach walks, not thin. Well, back then, I certainly was not thin myself. But I did enjoy beach walks. And certainly, by the age of 39, I should have been mature enough to have developed a deeper appreciation for that second category. But, all I can say in my defense is, well, men are pigs. On an afternoon, just like any other afternoon, the phone rang in my apartment kitchen. It was attractive in certain lights. She said her real name was Marge. She had just moved back from Seattle, from New York, where she had earned her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from a prestigious art school. She now worked in the suburbs, but lived downtown. Marge said she enjoyed the Oregon coast. She didn't say anything about skiing. Marge allowed that she was probably height, weight, proportional. She had already established that she was attractive, at the very least in certain lights. She was blonde, dirty blonde, she said, but I didn't care how often she washed her hair. So I hope you guys all caught all of that. She combined all the good points of both groups with none of the flaws. And I actually did a little spontaneous hop right there in my kitchen. Well, they say to embark on a great adventure, you have to lose sight of the shore. And I had always hugged the shore tightly. But, this free spirit, New Yorker, artist, programmer person, she was really interesting. But even, just to meet her would require me to row a small dinghy out a little ways out into the bay, metaphorically speaking. So at the designated time, I found my way to a Belltown bar for the maiden Marge meeting. She was as advertised, blonde, HWP, but she hadn't told me she was attractive in all lights. And she hadn't told me about her kind face and how easy it was to talk to her. So Marge ran away from home at 16 to join the revolution. She lived all over Portland, Seattle, Northern California, Alaska, Bremerton, and New York 3 different times. Eventually it was time to go, but I didn't want this to end. So I suggested we grab dinner somewhere. Well, she said she had some leftover beans and lamb in her refrigerator. And so as we were going out, she went to say goodbye to her friend behind the bar. She lived in, an old solid building downtown with concrete floors. And in her living room of her studio apartment, she'd dragged the mattress off of her sleeper sofa and put it on the floor to sleep on. And the walls were covered with abstract art, just really creative, and they were mostly hers. But I'd say the most interesting feature was the monorail between the Seattle Center and downtown. It went right past her living room, and so you wave to the passengers, and they would wave back. Shortly after I got there, the phone rang, and it was the bartender from the bar, her friend, and he had just called to make sure I hadn't killed her. I hadn't. So, but I knew that this was definitely not the kind of woman who could sit on the couch, even if there had been any room on the couch, because the couch was filled with art projects and photographs and drawings and things like that. So I knew that this wasn't somebody who could just sit around and demand, "Oh, when's dinner ready?" So I busied myself clearing out the sink. It contained old TV parts. She'd liberated them from a junk-filled vacant yard. I was going to make earrings out of them. Well, so I told her it was only fair that I cook her dinner the next weekend at my place. But, I had to look around at the abstract art on the walls, and I had to tell her, I had to warn her, the landscapes on my walls are very representational. Well, love at first sight, it's for starry teenagers. Dating in post-divorce middle age is the triumph of hope over experience. For adolescents, it's the heart-going pity-pat. For the older set, it's holding your breath. So that next Saturday, while I was waiting for Marge to arrive, I prepared dinner. Carly Simon's song, Anticipation, played on the stereo. And tomorrow, we might not be together. I'm no prophet. I don't know nature's way. So I'll try to see into your eyes right now and stay right here, because these are the good old days. So after dinner, it was time for a beach walk on Elki, which was near my apartment. And, at the saying goodbye at my first Marge meeting, I'd give him a little brotherly pat on his shoulder. So now, heading out the beach, I kind of awkwardly grabbed her hand. And she did the most unexpected thing. She cupped my hand in her hands and kissed it. Well, I guess if I'm going to be totally honest with you guys tonight, it was all over for me at that point. Wake the person, grab the rice, there's going to be a wedding. So they say to embark on a grand adventure, you have to let loose the shore. What shore? I was out to sea now.
Wow, enjoy the voyage. That's lovely. Wow, thank you, Eric, so much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you for taking the time to just lean in with us and to hear other stories. And a special thank you to our courageous storytellers for sharing a precious piece of your lives with us. Wow, what a gift. Without you, this night wouldn't happen. We also want to thank Scott Schaefer. Thank you, B-Town Blog, for your support in streaming. Our partners, Highline Heritage Museum, Burien Arts Association, Burien Culture Hub for their support in making this event possible. And lastly, special thanks to the community members that make up the Seven Stories Committee for your passion in making space for a community to come together. So until next time, take care, and don't forget to share your thoughts and of your experience here with us today. Have a great evening. Thanks again.